Good. I started yawning. But yes, tonight is the last, well, not really, the last class on evolution. God willing, Sunday, I prepared a little lesson on apologetics to kind of fill in the gaps and review a little bit of what we've gone through this week. I thought it was appropriate. Because biology is not the only key to apologetics. There's a whole lot more to it. And now that everyone's interests have been piqued by the VBS that we've had, which has been great. So I thought it would be a good idea to talk about that. So why don't we start with a prayer? Father in heaven, we are so thankful to be here. We are so thankful that we believe you and that you made a way for us. You brought us out of darkness into light. You opened our heart, you opened our eyes to see something that maybe we didn't want to see before, to see something that maybe we didn't understand before, and to make sense really of this world, not leaning on man's ideas or what people may think or opinions or perspectives that keep changing from culture to culture, time to time, and place to place. But we're thankful that we found meaning in your word, in your revelation, which is your wisdom that cannot be known by science or by any other means. We're so thankful to know that, to come to know that, and to come to grow in that as well, so that we know that our hope, where our hope is. And that's why we smile, because we have a hope that is alive. We have a hope that is real. And the reason for that hope is what we're talking about in these evenings. We thank you. We're thankful that you've given us a language to do it. And we're thankful now that we can share these things in an appropriate way. Thank you for everybody here. Help us relish in these things tonight and understand that we are truly and wonderfully made by you. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Amen. So we've made some distinctions in the last few classes between macroevolution and microevolution. Those terms were really introduced when Darwin started writing The Origin of Species back in the 1800s. And so Darwin observed something, and that's what science is. Science is observation. You observe what is happening, you try to explain it. And he explained quite a few things that led to what is known as microevolution, which is speciation. That's another way to call it, which is an observable fact that animals differentiate, they multiply, they create different species. But that is not macroevolution. What we've been talking about yesterday and today is macro, M-A-C-R-O, stands for big leaps, as opposed to small leaps. And it is those big leaps that there's really no hard evidence for. It's a theory, it's faith. In other words, what scientists and evolutionists believe about our origins takes more faith than what we believe about our origins. Because the question of origins cannot be touched by science, because no human being was there. And so nobody was there to calculate or gather some scientific data or evidence. There's no observable way to recreate what happened. You don't even know what happened, right, at the end of the day. And so it's important to distinguish those two things. Yes, evolution is true, partially, micro. But what we greatly dispute and differ is those leaps of faith that are needed to try to propose something that sounds scientific and may have started because the micro of it part sounds good and can be proven in a lab, but that doesn't mean the macro part of it is the same thing. It doesn't at all. And we're going to get into a fallacy, a logical fallacy that can explain why such people make leaps like that and think that the leap that they're making is consistent with the things that have been observable. It's important to distinguish those two things. So no evidence, no tangible, credible evidence really has been found to support those blind leaps that some scientists claim happen. The evidences that claim to support this biological evolution really end up being in three different categories that we're going to talk about today. Meaning, do these support human evolution in the end? Let's start by talking about the fossil record. Interestingly, that when Darwin wrote The Origin of Species, he did say, without knowing, because there was some things known about the fossil record at the time, but not a lot. But he did say that the proof to what he was saying, in other words, the macro part of it, right? The proof to that would be found in the fossil record. He said, as we studied and looked in the fossil record, for sure, that's where we would find these transitional forms, and he said it would be there, proving indeed that there was such a macro leap that we could take. And so the fossil record increasingly becomes an important part of the tangible evidences that a scientist would need to either make a leap of faith or falsify that leap and say, yeah, this is true, this really happened. But as we have been studying this week, while macroevolution would predict the existence of billions of transitional forms, all interconnected in the fossil record, including the human evolution part of it, they are conspicuously absent. We don't really see any transitional forms. We just see different kinds of animals right from the get-go existing in the fossil records from the beginning. So there should be a lot of different transitional forms. We should find them readily because evolution took millions of years. So why aren't we up to our knees? That is a very interesting question. Another question that one of the brothers told, we were chatting a little bit before VBS, and he said, likewise, transitional forms are absent in the fossil record, but aren't they absent right now? Do we see any species right now evolving into a different one? Have they been observed doing that since we have science? Have we seen, I mean, if this is so, we should see some, person halfway there saying, oh, I'm not done yet, but I'm going to get to where you are soon. Give me another million years and I'll be where you're at. Where are they? Where are they? Shouldn't there be tons of them? So not only are they absent in the fossil record, they're just not there at all anywhere. That is something important to consider. This absence of transitional forms is glaring. Paleontologists who examined the fossils, they've discovered that these transitional forms are absent. And so we're going to talk about three different ways that these fossils that do exist, or even the ones that don't, are categorized either as inadequate, as erroneous, or as irrelevant. Those are the three categories that we're going to be looking at. And interestingly, all the quotes that I have for you today, and the ones that we actually heard from yesterday, yes, who spoke? Who are these people speaking? Evolutionists themselves. So we're going to learn from the evolutionists why evolution doesn't have any tangible evidence. Because it's not the creationists saying it, it's the evolutionists themselves who keep telling each other that they don't have adequate records, that they are missing stuff, and that they are really, at the end of the day, just yes. Or really, we should say, having faith in their own theory, right? Because it's not science when you have to go by faith, isn't it? So let's look at some of these categories. Oops, I forgot to change my slide here, the fossil record. Here are the three categories for evidence for evolution. Some of them that are inadequate, some are just plain erroneous.
Some over here.
Oh, we gotta do things. Those are Josiah's. I got one.
All right, the extra one.
Thanks, bro. Man, it feels like autumn. I love this August. It's great, isn't it? I love this August. How it's starting. I know it's not going to end that way, but I'm enjoying it while it's there. So yeah, let's talk about these. First category, inadequate. Why would we call them inadequate evidence? Why are they inadequate? Well, let the evolutionists tell you. they're gonna teach us tonight by their quotes. Just mind you, these are not creationist views. And yesterday's they weren't either. Didn't you were surprised that most of the quotes that we've mentioned are from the evolutionists themselves, which is what surprised me when I was in college. I was a fervent evolutionist before I became a Christian. And I was studying it in Stony Brook University, of all places, where they believe firmly in evolution. All of them do. And so as I was learning in the middle of it, I became a Christian. And I used to go to my professors, Dr. Heckel. I don't know if he's still, anybody here in Stony Brook in the biology department? No. Okay. He was one of my favorite. He was the dean of biology. And I love the guy. He was a great guy, very humble guy. He had like 3 PhDs. And we would sit down and talk about evolution. And he would admit to me the very same things that you're going to hear these evolutionists admit. The only professor that fought me on any of these things during my 7-year tenure at Stony Brook was my genetics professor. And she didn't have any good arguments, you know. But man, did I have some great conversations and honest conversations with my professors. Brothers and sisters, I tested this out with them. I went toe to toe with them. And at the end of the day, they all admitted, yeah, you're right. It's a theory. It's a guess. There is no hard evidence. And I was like, thank you. Thank you for being honest with me. So just to let you know, I've been through this rigmarole myself. Inadequate evidences. So according to the evolutionists, the fossil evidence for human evolution is meager at best. We're going to now look at a quote from Kate Wong, evolutionist and senior science writer for Scientific American. You know that literature, that magazine? Ever read magazines? It's a good magazine for scientists. So, Kate Wong, what does she say? She says the origin of our genus, which is Homo as in Homo sapien, is one of the biggest mysteries facing scholars of human evolution. Based on the meager evidence available, scientists have surmised that Homo arose in East Africa. So paleontologists often rely on very few fossil bones. You would think that there would be more, right? There aren't. Very few, and sometimes just even fragments, slivers of something that you'd have to guess, what is it, a sliver of a jaw or where does it belong? That's how small some of the pieces are. And they're found here, they're found there, and they all try to construct the alleged tree of human evolution from these tiny little pieces of evidence. So Wong went on to say something else. Says here, can you read that? I can read it. I can't barely read it. For decades, paleoanthropologists have combed. Picture somebody with a comb, combing through the sand, because that's exactly what they're doing. The remote corners of Africa on hand and knee for fossils of Homo's earliest representatives. Their efforts have brought only modest gains. A jawbone here, a handful of teeth there. Most of the recovered fossils instead belong to either ancestral Australopithecines or later members of Homo creatures too advanced to illuminate the order in which our distinctive traits arose. With so little to go on, the origin of our genus has remained as mysterious as ever. So this is the evolutionist just telling you how it really is, being very plain and being honest, that there is really, that most of the human evolutionary tree is a guess at best, because there's very little to go on, and they've only found either human bones and remains or Australopithecines, which we're going to get into the difference later, a little later if we get there. That's it. There's nothing else. There's no in between, no transition, nothing that could say, oh, this is our common ancestor. You know, nothing like that at all, which is very surprising. So anyway, that quote was from 2012, Kate Wong's quote. And I did a little digging into Kate. and to the people at Scientific American to see if they had anything to say most recently about this. So I went to Scientific American, and here's another interesting quote from Kate Wong from 2020. And she says, the human saga we now understand is far more intricate than scholars of yore envisioned. The tidy tropes of our prehistory have collapsed under the weight of evidence because there is no single missing link that bridges apes to humans. There is no drumbeat march of progress towards a predestined goal. Our story is complicated, messy, and random. That's what she said. She said, listen, the tidy tropes of our prehistory. That means all the things, all the tree that they thought was so nice and tidy have collapsed under the weight of evidence. Why? Because there is none. There is none. That's why. Evolution is telling us, right? Want to hear some more quotes? Are you convinced yet? I don't know if we have time for all these quotes here. I really want to just kind of move on to this quote here. Let me skip over a few. I don't want to make this too long for you. So several years ago, New Scientist, this is from the New Scientist magazine, describes after a century, 100 years of searching for fossils, this is what they have to say. The fossils that decorate our family tree are so scarce that there is still more scientists than specimens. The remarkable fact is that all the physical evidence we have for human evolution can still be placed with room to spare inside a single coffin. One of my favorite quotes. Now, does such truth, though, dissuade evolutionists from accepting evolution? I remember when I was a staunch evolutionist, somebody asked me, well, why do you believe in evolution? And I had to think, yeah, why do I believe in evolution? Because I heard other people talking about it, because I heard my professors talking about it, because others have accepted it as a fact. But what do I really know about it? Right? And the fact is that most people keep believing in it because that's what's taught and that's what's accepted. But once you honestly start questioning, you will see the gaps as clear as and they see them too. When you wonder, aren't we looking at the same thing here? So why do they continue to accept it? Why do it? Well, here's an evolutionary paleoanthropologist. Boy, I really have to practice pronouncing these words. Lee Berger from the University of the Witwatersrand in Johannesburg, South Africa. He's actually became very famous this past decade for his notable fossil discoveries. And so he also admitted that there's a lack of human evolutionary evidence in the fossil record, but he has blind faith. He just keeps moving forward, even though the fossil record has failed to provide the evidence. What keeps him moving forward? He believes there's something out there. He believes it's there somewhere. He says, we really need a better record. Well, that's the one you got. And so you see this desire to provide the evidence, but it's just not there. So he says, oh, we need a better record. Maybe you need a better theory, because the record speaks for itself. But this is the problem. See, people want to continue to believe. And often what has happened, as we'll get to it in a minute, is that because there is no evidence in the past, what has happened? They make it up. And they try to supply it. And thankfully, they've been caught, have been scolded by their own community, which is glad, scientists keeping scientists honest, because they don't want to give themselves a worse name. than they had. But this is what happens. This guy believes there's something out there, and so he's gonna keep searching. But unfortunately, if you're not willing to change your theory and how you look at it, it's like Einstein said. What did people say Einstein claimed to say? Insanity is doing what? Thinking the same thing and expecting a different result. Wonder if they should look at Einstein's quote. Right? Okay, let's talk about the second category, erroneous. So those were inadequate. The first one we saw is just inadequate. He said it, we need a better record for his faith, right? For his faith. But what does the actual record say? That's what we want to get into. So this second category is erroneous evidences. So Berger, the guy that we quoted from before, he actually chided other paleontologists for their standard practice of assigning fossil fragments to a particular genus, since isolated bones aren't enough evidence. So I really like this guy. At least he keeps the others honest. And this is what he said. He said, one can no longer assign isolated bones to a genus. You can't take a mandible, which is the lower jaw, a maxilla, an upper jaw, or a collection of teeth, and try to say, oh, this is what this man transition looked like. I appreciate his honesty in saying that. He says that's what some of his colleagues have been doing. They say, oh, we found the transitional species, we found it. No, it's a tooth. You found a tooth. and he gets angry. He says, you can't do that. That's not how science works. So at least we got evolutionists keeping other evolutionists honest in this whole thing, right? But that's what's going on. Another one, from George Washington University, Bernard Wood, agreed that Berger is absolutely right. We cannot expect the paleoanthropology community to stop such unwise practices, because this human evolutionary tree that we're building would have to be cut down and used as firewood, because we keep making it up as we go along. And so based on that, because they know the history of what has happened in the past, and that's what I'm going to share with you right now under this category 2 of erroneous evidence. So all these have been debunked already, and they have been debunked by evolutionists, because they realize, this guy's playing dirty. He's trying to make it up. He's trying to falsify the records. And interestingly, you actually, if you look in your evolutionary biology book, you will find some of these mentioned as mistakes, as blunders in the scientific community. Some of them were straight con jobs from the scientific community, as you will see. And if you're not familiar with them, I'll share with you a few. Java Man. What was Java Man? A supposed human ancestor, later found to have been erroneously based on the skull cap of a gibbon, a type of monkey, and fossilized teeth and the thigh bone of a modern man. So they took the skull cap of a monkey and the bone of a person, and they said, oh, here we go. This is the missing link. And that's what the other evolutionists were saying. It says, you can't do that. You don't even know what this would look like. Stop doing that, the evolutionists are saying to each other, because we've made these blunders in the past. That's not making us look good. And that's what Java Man was. Piltdown Man, an alleged human evolutionary ancestor, later to be found a forgery. Somebody actually modified. So this is like, on purpose, modified an orangutan jawbone and a portion of a modern skull. Straight out con job, right? Then you got the Nebraska Man, alleged human ancestor. And this is interesting. Nebraska Man was fabricated from the tooth of a wild pig. Oh, you missed the family, you missed the genus, you missed everything. He just went straight. And that's what happened. You got Flipper Man. Another alleged human evolutionary ancestor, based on what was later known to be a fossilized rib of a dolphin. Orsey Man, I think that's how you pronounce this one, Orsey Man, based on the skull cap from a donkey. We got Java Man 2. Fossil was hailed as more evidence of a transitional creature, but then Time magazine ran a retraction, and the Smithsonian Institute said, no, this was actually the kneecap of an elephant. We got Southwestern Colorado Man, another retraction later on saying that this was teeth that they thought was from an antique horse. You got the Calaveras Man and so on and so forth. Just a lot of different things here to illustrate that, you know what? Like the other quote that I mentioned before, the guy says, we need a better record. He believes it's out there. Maybe these guys thought that something was out there too. But what was out there were their claims. That's what was out there, not the evidence itself. So this is what happens when you want to keep believing something that there's no evidence for, and you don't change the way you think to try to meet what the actual evidence says. You're bound to make these kind of blunders, and you're bound to go in this direction. So Michael Shermer, this guy, he is a popular skeptic. He's the executive director of the Skeptics Society and a monthly contributor to Scientific American. And he'll say hoaxes, because he just says that out there, these were just hoaxes, you know, hoaxes like the Piltdown Man and honest mistakes, some were honest mistakes, like the Nebraska Man, Calaveras Man, and Hesperopithecus. They are in time exposed. In fact, it was not creationists who exposed these errors, it was scientists who did so. Absolutely. You know, we agree that evolutionists police themselves, as most good science should do, and to their credit, they uncover their own blunders and their own hoaxes. But they're not willing to change their practices. So expect more mistakes as we go along. There's going to be many, many more. So that was on the category of erroneous evidence. Now let's go to category number 3, irrelevant evidence. Are you still with me? Yeah, you need some cake, some candy. Because this is heady stuff, man. You know, you'd be like, what? Held it down, what? All these names, all these terms. All right, good. I'm glad you're with me. It's day 4 of I was gonna say of evolution. No, yes. Yeah, what? What's going on? So irrelevant evidence. Now this is very interesting. Okay, I've had to brush up by the way. My son did challenge me. He said, Dad, all the stuff that you know about evolution is from the 80s, from when you went to college. And I said, yeah, you're right. And listening to the lectures in the last few nights, I've learned some stuff because I honestly haven't brushed up on this. I haven't really cared to, because my interests lie a little more now in history than they do in scientific evidences. I think they all play a role, but in my opinion, history is very powerful. History is extremely powerful and undeniable. Science can get a little heavy, a little iffy at times, even though it's clear, right? We've been talking about some very clear stuff. So I've had to brush up, and I've learned some stuff. Jeffrey, Dr. Jones here taught me some things when he did his lecture, and Dr. Brazier, where is he? Where's Dr. Brazier? Yeah, he is he here? Oh, there you go. He's shy. They want to raise his hand. I learned some things too, and in preparing for this lesson, yeah, I learned some stuff. I was like, oh wow, look at this. They've tried some new things. Back in my day, there were a series of things like punctuated equilibrium was really famous at the time, and they all swore this is how it's happening. Where's punctuated equilibrium now? Nobody talks about it. Why? Never worked. They gave up on it. So just because they're new ideas, check in another 10 years and see where they are. That's how it is with this thing, right? So let's look at these irrelevant evidences. So I learned something here. This is really powerful stuff, by the way. So how many supposed species, because we're talking about, again, macroevolution, meaning, okay, we came from gorillas or chimpanzees, which are our most closest relative. So if that is so, if we're going to follow the logic, there should be a ton of different transitional species leading up to the Homo genus, which is we, Homo sapiens, right? And there are all kinds of varieties. They talk about the Homo erectus, they talk about the Homo neanderthalis, the Homo habilis, and we got a little tree here. I don't know if you can read it, or see it, barely see the infographic there. But they made this little evolutionary tree, supposedly how they all relate to each other and who came from where, right? Homo naledi, Homo floresiensis, Homo heidelbergen, and so on and so forth. And then there's another one that's not Homo, it's Australopithecus africanus, Australopithecus afarensis, Australopithecus robustus. So there's another branch called Australopithecus. And then you got the Homo branch, and then you got the Australopithecus. Those are the two most closely related that they found. And that's it. There's nothing else. Nothing. Two, the ones that is human. And think of these as varieties of humans, like dogs, right? There's all kinds of dogs. Rottweilers, German Shepherds, and tell me a few other names. Chihuahuas. Come on, something a little more manly. I'm kidding. And beagles, pit bulls, Saint Bernards. Tons of them, right? I mean, we could be here all night naming them. But they're dogs, right? They're dogs. Are they not? Are they something else? They're dogs. Just like we could name a bunch of cats. You know as many cats as dogs? Probably not, right? A lot of different kind of cats. But they're cats. There's just cats. Different kinds of species of cats, right? You got all kinds of species of dogs. But they're dogs. They're not a different animal. And then you got homos. I'm talking about the Homo sapien. Okay? Homo sapien, Homo neanderthalis. Are they all human? Yes. We're not talking about different, links or transitional forms here. We're talking about just humans. And aside from them, that's it. The only other thing that you got is the Australopithecus. Now, let me get into that a little bit here. Upon closer examination of these species and others, actually, creationists have determined from statistical analysis that all the Homo species are likely varieties of different kinds of humans that have walked on Earth in the past, which is what I just said. They're all human beings. And so evolutionary classification, which is called cladistics, I had a lot of fun in my vertebrate zoology class. I love that class. All we did in that class was cladistics, basically evolutionary trees. And why is this come first, and this comes here, and that comes there, and that's what we did all day long. And they all classify by slight changes in the bone structures, especially for vertebrate zoology. If you study invertebrate zoology, there were like 4 classes because there's so many invertebrates. And it's a lot of fun. I enjoy that. And so I know what a cladogram is because we talked about them. And all of these cladograms, they assume that all of these ancestors are related through common descent. And so when you build this cladogram, like you see there, what we call the evolutionary tree, when you build it, you're only building it upon detection of degrees of similarities between species. However, that's what cladistics, this is the one that creationists use. They use something called baraminology, to detect similarities and distinctions between creatures. So the creationists also all actually detect more of a true relationship, since they use two factors of detection: similarities and distinctions, whereas cladistics only detects similarities. That's it. And so it's a tree that, you know, you kind of make it as you go along. And if you don't have the transitional forms, then, you know, you're making it up as you go along, literally, because you don't really know. It's based on similarity. That's it. Not on any fossil record per se that, oh yeah, this was the direct descendant. It's just the similarities. That's how they're arranged. And so in this kind of classification, we have to now talk about what a species really is. And I'm not going to get into it too much. All I'm going to say about this is that when God created kinds, we know that in the book of Genesis it says each kind after itself, right? It mentions kinds. So what is a kind? How can we define a kind in modern scientific terms? What is it? Species? That's what some believe before. Or genus. How many of you know the whole thing? You know, kingdom, species, family. I forgot it. You remember, Laura, right? There's an acronym for it, isn't there? King Philip, blah, 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 right? Okay, you know it. All right, there you go. So if you know the classification, right, starting with kingdom, then phylum, class, order, family, genus, species, right? Homo sapiens, it's genus, species. What's our family? No, that would be kingdom. Kingdom Animalia, right? So if you go and name all the classification that we're a part of, it's like you're getting a long name, right? Like my name is Pedro Gustavo Gelabert González Nieves Caimán y Adams, right? That's my family tree. So as a species, our names have a family tree like that too. So we could say that the biblical kind roughly can correlate to the taxonomic category of family, right? Or maybe even genus, but definitely not species, because they would not have fit in the ark, first of all, right? You can't take all the dogs in the world and say that Noah had them. No, maybe the original dog kind that God made on day 6 of creation, that kind after the flood, you know, would have produced all varieties of foxes and wolves and jackals and coyotes and dingoes, because they're all varieties of that family, right? So Noah didn't need in the ark a dingo, a jackal, a fox, and all these, you know, probably I didn't even know if they were there, to be honest with you. There was just the common ancestor of the dog that God made on day 6. That's who was in the ark. And then after that, that kept speciating according to natural selection, which we know is true evolution, right? We don't dispute that one. And that's how we get now all these different varieties. Well, that's how it is, right? So God had in the ark all these families, which, by the way, you wouldn't need a lot of space to put them in. Mostly just really chordates or not fish, but the fish, you know, were swimming in the sea and the birds were flying in the air. So you wouldn't need the ones that couldn't swim and needed to be in the boat. So that's what the kind is. Think of it as a family or a genus, not the species itself. So the Australopithecines, which was the other group of humans, interestingly, first the creationists who were studying this, they said, you know what? These Australopithecines, they have no relationship to the humans whatsoever. And this prediction and subsequent verification now, interestingly, is being acknowledged more and more by the evolutionary community. That's something interesting. I did not know that it was the creationists who first said, these Australopithecines, they're not really humans. They just belong somewhere else. They don't even belong in the human family tree or cladogram, as the evolutionists say. They're not really the same thing. It's just a whole other different animal altogether. And interestingly enough, now the evolutionary community is actually saying, you know what? you guys are right too. And they now have their own separate group. Their own separate group. I'm sorry, I'm falling behind on flipping my PowerPoint here. So the Homo varieties now don't include the Australopithecines. And let's look at some quotes as to why. From Lord Solly Suckerman. This guy, he's a British anatomist, and he studied Australopithecines for over 15 years. And he concluded that if man did descend from an ape-like ancestor, he did it without leaving any fossils traces at all of the steps of the transformation. In other words, it's anybody's guess. There's no proof that it happened this way. That's this guy who studied it for 15 years. And he said, there's no evidence that this is part of the human evolutionary tree. Same thing by the late evolutionist Ashley Montague. He said the skull form of all Australopithecines shows too many specialized and ape-like characters to be either the direct ancestor of a man or the line that led to man. He says it's too different. It's not there. And based largely on the nature of one of the species teeth, these other two guys, Martin and Brigitte, from the French Evolutionary Paleontologists Museum and Natural History, they believe that all Australopithecines should be placed in a side branch on the evolutionary tree. They don't belong in the Homo sapien evolutionary tree at all. Right? So this is what they're saying. Meaning what? Do you realize what this means? That there are now less fossils that can be attributed to the descendancy or to the common ancestor that they're still looking for. They had little before. Now there's less. By their own admission, by the way. By their own admission. So bottom line, nice castle. Macroevolution is not the same as microevolution, as I said before. It's just not there. The evidence is not there. No transitional forms, no fossil record evidence, no bone evidence, no paleontology, nothing. By their own admission. Yet it's still being pursued as if it's a valid scientific theory, but it really sounds to me more like faith than anything else. Well, what about other alleged evidences? Are we running out of time? Yeah, we're gonna be falling asleep here in a minute. I need some more water. You guys need some coffee? 8:30. Okay. I just want to make sure I don't miss the good stuff. I think I have some good stuff here. It's a long list. I don't think we're gonna get through it all, but you get the idea, right? Get the idea. So I'm gonna just run quickly through this visual organs. You've heard about this, right? These are among some of the other alleged evidences of human evolution, because the fossil record just you heard it from the evolutionists. We need a different record. He said it. I didn't say it. He said it. We need a different record. So what are you going to do? Oh, well, let's talk about vestigial organs. Maybe the fact that we have vestigial organs means that that is evidence of some kind of evolution. What's vestigial? Vestigial are thought to be parts of the body that we no longer use because we are evolved. We don't use them anymore. And the fact that they're still there means that we must have evolved for an animal or some common ancestor that used these things. But just because you don't understand what they're there for doesn't mean they're not useful. See, that's the problem here. Circular reasoning. You don't think they're useful. You don't know their use. So be careful with that. Because that could be a logical fallacy right there that is bringing you to an erroneous conclusion, like wisdom teeth. It's actually been found in some cultures that the way that they eat and the diet that they have, that the wisdom teeth is actually useful for them. Maybe not for you who eat sandwiches and Doritos and potato chips. Maybe you don't need wisdom teeth. Right? But there are some people out there that actually do use them and need those extra molars in the back, right? To crack the nuts or whatever else they use. Right? Tonsils. Some people say, you don't need your tonsils. Well, leave mine alone. I like my tonsils. Actually, tonsils have been found to be useful. They're part of your immune system. Yeah. Oh, you don't need them. Let's take them out. Oh, yeah, you don't need your arm. Cut it off. I can live without one. Hey, I want my arm. The coccyx, right? You never know about the coccyx until you hit it. And you're like, there's my coccyx. There it is. It's alive and well. Well, what is the coccyx? It's like a shock absorber. Try to sit without a coccyx. See how it goes well for you. It's where all your connections for your pelvic muscles are. And if we were to take it out, you wouldn't be able to sit down or walk. So I think that you really need it. Just because it looks like a tailbone doesn't mean it is. All right. Common design. You ever heard of that? Okay. Appendix. Right. We don't need the appendix. Let's take it out. But there's actually a study in 2017. Wow, that's very recent. A study in 2017 that actually says, no, this is a very important part of the immune system, just like the tonsil. Okay. Parathyroid. Right? Where's your parathyroid? Who knows? I didn't even know I had one. Okay. The parathyroid, it regulates calcium intake. Very, very important. And so on and so forth. Many things. Hair. Because we don't need hair. Yeah, well, I'm glad I got my hair. Yeah, it protects me from the sun. Temperature extreme. Just because you don't think you need it, and maybe you don't. Maybe you don't need hair. Maybe you don't need the tonsils. You can live just fine with them. But then I can ask you, can you live without your hand or your arm? Absolutely. But I don't think you would want them taken, right? If you could keep them. So this idea about vestigial organs, I don't know, doesn't sound logically sound to me the way that they came about it. Oh, well, this is true. No, I'm sorry. Let's move on. But unfortunately, this idea, will be the last thing I say, right? Because I'm out of time. I'm out of time. Let me see. What should I say? Oh gosh, there's some good stuff here. But we'll have to skip it. But this is the latest on here we go. Wisdom teeth, tonsils. So now instead of junk organs or vestigial organs, now the idea has moved to junk DNA. So now the idea is vestigial genes. Well, you don't need those genes, why do you have them? Well, if you didn't know what my parathyroid and tonsils and my hair was for, now you're going to make a guess about the genes. I mean, you know how complex the gene structure is. We're still trying to find out what all the genes are. I mean, back in my day here at Cold Spring Harbor Labs, they did the Human Genome Project. Took them, I don't know how many decades to finish, and they're still figuring it out. What each gene does and how. It's not completely mapped, because if it was, then we would have a directory of everything that everything can do and how to turn this one off and that one. We know a lot. There's a lot that has been uncovered, but until it is all uncovered and tested, you cannot tell me that some genes are vestigial. I'm sorry. That just, again, you're making another logical fallacy right there just to try to prove, oh, well, we have this vestigial gene. So that means that maybe you could use it in some other ancestral line, and the fact that you inherited means that you came from somewhere. No, it's sounding like a circular argument to me. So anyway, guys, we could have talked a little more. That's a picture of the DNA helix, very beautiful. That, by the way, that was, where that was discovered, right? Or not discovered, but photographed, and the double helix theory and all that came from. That was right here on Long Island, where these studies were done. And I actually met the guy. He was alive when I was a teacher at Prince Academy, and we took the kids there and all that. I'm forgetting his name right now, like Aaron I have vestigial memory, so. But he has a famous thing. Forgetting right now. So yeah, we were gonna talk about this human chimp chromosome fusion and human chimp DNA similarities and all this, but you get the picture. God willing, on Sunday, we'll kind of pick this up, not from the biology point of view, but I'm gonna introduce some other things for our consideration when defending the faith. What are some of the things besides science that can also help us defend the truth? I hope you enjoyed this lecture. Hope it wasn't too heady for you, but thank you for your attention, for not falling asleep. God bless.